next question is, what was it like taking over the costume department of an established show? Did you have a large archive of clothes from series one? No, I didn't actually, and part of the reason for that is that I started when David Tennant started the Christmas Invasion, and when I was hired, series one was still being aired on television and it had been recommissioned. But when series one first was being filmed, they didn't know it was going to be quite as successful as it was. And Lucinda Wright, who worked on series one, a lot of the stuff that she used, a lot of it was hired, and obviously that had been returned to the hire companies. And also she had quite a fair amount of costume that artists had bought, actually, because on normal productions that's what you would do at the end of the series. You would probably sell them for half price to put them back on your budget, and etc, etc. So actually, you know, a fair amount of Rose's wardrobe from series one and things that Lucinda had specially made, you know, things from the family, essentially, Mickey and bits and pieces and stuff that had been bought. There wasn't, you know, there was no costume room. There was a room that had been used that year to put costume rails in the old studios, but it wasn't a costume department in terms of the building. When I took over, I didn't inherit a team. I employed my own team. Everybody in the industry is freelance. There are no staff, there are no guaranteed jobs. Everybody's hired specifically for that production, for that time. Although I had one staff member who'd been recommended, who'd done some dailies from series one, Lindsay Bonacorsi, who then came on with me for the rest of the series that I worked on. You know, I was free to do what I wanted and hire who I wanted. So I didn't inherit a department of any sort. Also, I mean, I should say that in terms of the costume store, that actually it wasn't until the end of series two, when the building moved to Upper Boat, that I had to fight for a space to even store the costumes we'd used on series two, so we didn't have to carry them around on our wardrobe truck for the year. And it certainly wasn't a costume department as such in the true sense of the word, not what we think of as a costume department, that's for sure. In terms of the building, it was a room where we could hang some clothes up and leave them there. The one thing I did inherit from series one was, for the regeneration, we had to put David Tennant in Chris Eccleston's costume. And they'd used the leather jacket a lot in series one, and actually it had been cracking quite badly because it was such an old jacket that the leather was so distressed and so worn out that they were having to put leather food into it all the time to nourish it. So it really was kind of on its last legs, that jacket. And I know that there are discussions about how it changes colours, and I think that's because they had two jackets which they used. They had the one he wore and they had a stunt jacket. They also had, I think, you know, one that they used for photographs. So often they had a best jacket that they used just for stills, I believe. We only had David in that costume once. I inherited that the same way that I had Rose's costume as well, which we used for that opening scene. In terms of inheriting anything else, really you have to treat it as a new show, because also I had a new doctor. So I wasn't inheriting a doctor, I had my own doctor and I was putting a stamp on it, and my own new monsters. So really there wasn't a huge amount that got carried over. The Autons came back at one point, but really we just moved forward. In terms of the question and the history of the show, in terms of its, you know, long history, and how I felt about that. Obviously there's a huge pressure in taking on a show which is very well known, and I knew that at my original interview. I knew that Doctor Who's very famous. I watched it when I was a child, so that was always a bit weird, to know that you were taking on a show that was something that had that long history. But really, you get on with it. You're not thinking about that. You're thinking about what you're trying to do, really. And it's irrelevant about history. It's just doing what you're doing on a day-to-day basis and doing the best you can.